Tonight, one small mistake could turn this shelter into a death trap. The fire is shrinking. Outside, wind drives snow across open ground. Inside, a child sleeps beneath an animal hide. There are no walls, no heater, no dry firewood waiting by a door. If the fire dies, the temperature falls. If the hide gets wet, it stops protecting. And if the group burns too much wood tonight, there may be nothing left for tomorrow. That is the real danger of prehistoric winter. Not one storm, but a chain of small failures. Cold stiffens fingers. It slows thought. Eventually, the body loses heat faster than it can replace it. Yet human relatives lived through cold landscapes long before modern houses existed. How did they make it through the night? First, there was no single ice age winter. Climate moved between colder and milder phases. Some people faced open grassland, cutting wind and frozen nights. Elsewhere, cold rain could be just as dangerous as snow. The problem was not simply a low number on a thermometer. Moving air pulled heat from exposed skin. Wet clothing carried heat away faster. Frozen ground drained warmth from anyone who sat or slept directly on it. A human body produces heat, but it also leaks heat. A compact body loses less relative warmth than a long, narrow one, and Neanderthals were powerfully built. Their bodies may have helped in cold environments, but anatomy was not a winter coat. A strong body still needed calories. A baby still cooled quickly. An injured person still had to survive the night. Biology helped. Behavior did the rest. Fire was powerful, but it was never enough on its own. Fire created a small artificial climate. It warmed the side of the body facing the flames. It dried damp hide. It made a dark shelter usable and gave predators a reason to remain outside the light. Wonderwork Cave in South Africa preserves burnt material in an archaeological layer about 1 million years old. It is powerful evidence that early humans controlled fire far back in time. But it does not mean every population could light a flame whenever it wanted. At some European sites occupied during cold periods, archaeologists find surprisingly little evidence of fire. The traces may have vanished, fires may have been used elsewhere, or some groups may genuinely have lived for periods without them. A fire was therefore not a magic object. It was a job. Someone had to find and carry dry fuel. Damp wood produced smoke. Exposed flame disappeared in wind. The safest fire was often the fire that never completely went out. Embers could be protected beneath ash, carried a short distance, then fed again. People could sleep between a hearth and a rock wall. A hide screen could reflect heat and block a draft. The first winter technology was not just flame. It was fire management. Fire helped, but the wind could still take the heat away. The next layer was shelter. A cave looks like the obvious answer, but caves were not everywhere. They could be damp, smoky, occupied by animals, or badly positioned for food and water. Even inside a cave, location mattered. Deep chambers were dark. Entrances admitted wind. A shallow overhang could block rain while allowing smoke to escape. At Bruniquel Cave in France, Neanderthals entered more than 300 meters underground. About 176,000 years ago, they broke stalagmites into pieces, arranged them into large rings, and used fire beside them. The rings were not houses. We do not know exactly what they were for, but they show planning, construction, and controlled activity in a place with no natural light. Open-air shelters are harder to prove because wood, grass, cord, and hide decay. A few stones or post holes may be all that remains. Still, the physics are simple. A low windbreak can matter more than a high roof. Branches anchored with stones slow the air. Hide or brush closes the gaps. Grass beneath the body separates warm skin from cold soil. The goal was not to make the inside comfortable, it was to make heat loss slow enough for the body and the fire to keep up. Even a good shelter failed the moment someone stepped outside. Shelter could also move with the person. Animal hides rarely survive for tens of thousands of years, so the history of clothing is mostly a history of clues. At Contrebandier Cave in Morocco, people shaped bone into specialized tools between about 120,000 and 90,000 years ago. Their form and wear are consistent with working leather and fur. Stone scrapers cleaned fresh skin. Smooth bone tools worked its surface without cutting it. Repeated working helped a hide remain flexible. The finished shape is unknown. Coverings could be wrapped, tied, or joined through pierced holes with leather thong. Much later, fine bone needles made close-fitting layers and footwear easier. There is also an unusual witness, the clothing louse. Clothing lice live in fabric rather than permanently on the human head. Genetic estimates suggest that habitual clothing in Homo sapiens existed at least around 83,000 years ago, and perhaps much earlier. That estimate applies to our own species. It cannot tell us exactly what Neanderthals wore. Their tools and cold environments make body coverings plausible, but the clothing itself is gone. The honest reconstruction is simple worked hide, wrapped or tied, useful, imperfect, and repeatedly repaired. The next problem was fuel. In winter, warmth had to be eaten. Warmth also had to be eaten. In cold conditions, maintaining body temperature consumes energy. Walking through snow, carrying fuel, and hunting large animals consume even more. Meat supplied protein, but fat was especially valuable. Marrow inside long bones and fat around organs stored dense energy. Breaking bone to reach marrow was not a desperate final act. It was efficient use of an animal that had already cost time and danger to obtain. Winter planning began before the coldest night. Groups followed animals, returned to useful shelters, and selected camps, protected by terrain. Food might be dried, naturally frozen, smoked, or consumed while available. Mobility was part of survival. An excellent cave in an empty valley still meant starvation. Tools, hides, embers, and knowledge had to move. Then came the problem no tool could solve: doing it alone. None of these systems worked well alone. A single person could not gather fuel, watch children, repair hides, prepare food, and guard a fire all night. A group could divide the work. One person collected branches, while another worked hide or prepared food. At night, adults could take turns feeding the hearth. This was not comfort in the modern sense. Smoke irritated eyes. Hides carried insects. Wind found every opening. A fire warmed one side, while the other remained cold. But cooperation created redundancy. If one person became sick, someone else knew the fuel route. A wet hunter could receive a dry hide. A dead hearth could borrow a living ember. The group was not merely living inside the shelter. The group was part of the shelter. But some of the most important layers left almost no trace. Archaeology preserves stone and bone far better than warmth. It can show a scraper, but not its hides, ash, but not the person who tended the fire, post holes, but not the wall above them. That absence creates a temptation to draw a perfect hide tent, a fitted fur coat, and a roaring fire in every scene. The real picture was probably less tidy. Technologies appeared at different times and places. Knowledge could be lost, fuel could run out, and fires could fail. Many people died from exposure. Survival did not come from one invention, spreading instantly across the human world. It came from layers of protection that could be combined when materials and knowledge allowed. A body suited well enough to the climate, terrain that stopped the wind, insulation beneath the sleeper, worked hide around the skin, controlled fire, dense food, and other people. Imagine the camp again near dawn. The wind is still moving outside. The shelter is low and smoky. The fire has become a bed of orange coals, but the child beneath the hide is warm enough. One adult adds a dry branch. Another opens the windbreak and looks across the frozen ground for the day ahead. There is no house. There is no heater. There is only a carefully maintained pocket of survivable climate. Early humans did not defeat winter. Together, they made small places where winter could not take all their heat at once. If you want to see how humans survived ordinary life before it became comfortable, like this video and subscribe to Before Comfort.